so excited. Welcome to City Line Church. My name is Megan Lemmons. I get to be the community life pastor, so I get to oversee the community groups. And on behalf of the whole team, I just want to say welcome. We're so excited you're spending your morning with us. If you're tuning in online, welcome to you. If you're listening to the podcast tomorrow when it's uploaded, welcome to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everybody listening in. If you don't already know about our church, we think we're just kind of the perfect place for imperfect people, because honestly, we do not all get it right 100% of the time. We're just trying to figure out what it means to discover and follow Jesus, and hopefully, over time, get better and better at doing that together. So, welcome. Sit back, relax. We're jumping into week 2 of a series that we're calling Light of the World. Light of the world. Because Jesus truly is the light of the world. He is the light that illuminates our lives. He's the light that extinguishes darkness. And over these next couple weeks, we just wanted to take some time to look at the Christmas story. Christmas has been called, as Pastor Soy talked about last week, the most wonderful time of the year. And if you were at the Christmas tree lighting or you saw that video, you know Christmas at City Line is amazing. We had incredible lights. We had tons of food. There was merriment had by all. There was even a dance floor. Christmas is magical. And I have made it no secret that I myself am a true believer, a true Christmas lover through and through. I love every single thing about Christmas. I love the lights. I love the music. I love connecting, making new friends, hanging out with old friends, making new memories, laughing and eating way too many cookies and singing off key. I love it all. And when we look at Scripture, we see a beautiful Christmas story, a story of hope, a story of restoration, of Jesus, this light of Christmas coming down to be with us. But if we look closer, or really just pay attention at all, the original Christmas story was kind of messy. It was pretty heartbreaking, which is much like Christmas in our own lives sometimes. The original Christmas story was marked with a contrast of light and dark moments. And so over these next few moments, I want us to navigate together this contrast of light and darkness. This week, I'm going to be talking about having a better story. That's the title of this sermon, is Have a Better Story. Because even though the Christmas story is about Jesus, there was also a Grinch-like character in the original Christmas story that does stand out. You know the story of the Grinch, right? Yes, total Christmas classic. You know, it says every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. Why, you ask? It could be that his head wasn't screwed on quite right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. Oh, poor Grinch. The story, of course, isn't really about how the Grinch stole Christmas at all. Yeah, he stole trees, he stole decorations, he stole gifts, he stole food, he stole all of the Who pudding. By the time the Grinch, he returned to his house at the top of the mountain, thinking he had accomplished his goal, thinking he had taken everything, much to his surprise, the Grinch left one thing behind. He left Christmas in Whoville. And when the Whos woke up, we know the story, they gather around and they hold hands and they sing their song because they realize that Christmas isn't about all of the gifts. It's not about all of the food. This puzzled the Grinch. He was upset to no end because despite his best efforts, despite all of his evil intent, he hadn't stolen Christmas at all. He simply missed it. He missed Christmas. And much like the literary world's Grinch, there's a Grinch in the original Christmas story who missed Christmas. His name, as you might know, was King Herod. He went by a few other names as well. He went by Herod the Great. He also went by King of the Jews. And this particular title irked the Jews because Herod himself was not Jewish by descent. And he wasn't even religiously Jewish. He was actually appointed to be king of Judea by the Roman Senate in 40 BC. And I've been trying to think about how can I describe Herod to you in the most nice, polite terms. And he's a maniac. He is a total maniac. He was obsessed with his legacy. He was obsessed with his kingdom and his power and his control. He had 10 wives, all married for political advantage. And he was extremely paranoid. He was paranoid of losing even an ounce of his power. He was so paranoid that he would kill anybody he even slightly suspected of turning against him. During his reign, King Herod killed his wife, his mother-in-law, his brother-in-law, his uncle, 3 of his sons, and countless other innocent people in the community. He changed his will 5 times. See, he would have a son that would rise to favor in his eyes, and wanting to secure his legacy and his power, he would write that son into his will. But eventually his paranoia would win out, and he would begin to suspect that son of kind of working against him. And so like any rational person, he would kill his son and then write a new son into the will. And over time, his sons are kind of like, we don't want to be dad's favorite. It doesn't seem to end well here. He was hated and despised. He actually knew that he was hated. So much so that as he was dying, he knew that when he died, there would be celebrations in the street because he was finally dead. And so because he didn't want that to happen, because he was just so off of his rocker, he decided to arrest several nobles and leaders in the community who people thought of in high esteem. And he arrested them and he said, "On the day that I die, make sure you kill them. Because even if they're not mourning for me, I want to make sure the people are mourning when I die." Herod was a maniac. And speaking of the day of Herod's death, when we meet him in Matthew, and we meet him in our Christmas story, Herod was pretty close to dying. He actually was dying during this time. And see, he had finally kind of secured his situation, and then he hears some very disturbing news. Let's read the Christmas story in Matthew chapter 2. It's Matthew 2, 1 through 9, 12, and 16. It says this: Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. That's our case study guy for today. About the time, some wise men from the eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews?" Now, before we move past this, these wise men, it was customary during that time for kings from surrounding lands to send dignitaries to a land where a new king was. This was customary so that they could pay their respects and honor this new king. And they go to Jerusalem because that's where the palace is. So they're thinking, surely the king is going to be here. So they said, "Where's the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. This word "deeply disturbed" that Herod was, we already know he's deeply disturbed, but this word here in the Greek says that he was shaking violently. He was furious. He was seeing red. He was full of rage. And it says, as was everyone in Jerusalem, which that's kind of weird because the people of Jerusalem are Jewish. So why would they be concerned about this? Why would they be disturbed? They've been waiting for the Messiah. They've been waiting for the king. Well, the reality is that Herod was crazy. He would go unhinged when he felt like his power and his control was being threatened. And in this moment, he did. And when he felt threatened, he would go on a killing spree. And so because Herod was disturbed, the people were afraid. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star had first appeared. Then he told them, "Go ahead and go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, just come back to me so that I can go and worship him too, it's what's right." And after this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it came time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. And Herod was furious when he realized that these wise men had outwitted him. He sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. As we kind of learn about the type of leader that Herod was, that he was power hungry, that he was paranoid, we're not necessarily surprised by what we see him doing in our Christmas story. We're disturbed, we're alarmed, we're disgusted, but we're not surprised because we know that Herod was over the top, highly powerful, extremely paranoid, and bloodthirsty. His character that Matthew portrays for us is consistent with who he was in the history books as well. So Herod's personality in this moment is not necessarily surprising, but what might be surprising to us this morning is that we all have a little bit of Herod in us. Now, before you protest, stay with me, listen, because I think that there are 3 characteristics of Herod that we can all kind of have in our lives. They're these tendencies that actually keep us from the light of Christmas. And so this morning, I want us to kind of unpack what those three tendencies are, but I don't want us to leave us there because that's no good. I don't want us to leave us in the darkness of Christmas because Christmas is about the light, right? So then we're going to take a look at how we can step into the greater light of Christmas that Jesus invites us into. And so the first thing that makes us a little bit like Herod is that Herod, he had a need for power. He had a need for power. I don't think that I need to go into great length again about who Herod was. He was clearly power hungry. With the list of wives and the people that he killed, when it comes to being in control, Herod was literally king. Herod was amazingly persuasive, but he was also a skilled manipulator. In fact, there's a famous story about Herod. Do you remember the story of Antony and Cleopatra in your history books in class and high school and all of that good stuff? Well, during this time of feuding in Rome between Antony and Octavius, King Herod finds himself kind of siding on, I guess, the wrong side of the story, because he sides with Antony. He pledged his loyalty, his allegiance to Antony all the way to his death. And Antony did die. If you remember the story, Antony died at the hands of Octavius, and Octavius rises to power and becomes the new Caesar. This is no good for Herod. This is no good for Herod because he was a known supporter of the new Caesar's enemy. So he had 2 choices. He could sit and wait to be executed and killed for supporting the enemy, or he could run and hide. But Herod, being the controlling, manipulative person that he is, finds a third route where, of course, he can end up on top. Instead of waiting for his execution and running and hiding, Herod goes straight to Caesar's palace, not in Vegas, but the Caesar's palace. And everyone there is like, bro, what are you doing here? Like, we were on our way to go kill you. Actually, thanks, because now we don't have to make the trip. And Herod, he doesn't care, because he was the type of person that knew he had control of whatever room he walked into, even if that room was the leader of Rome. So basically the story goes is what happens is he goes into Octavius and he says, look, let's be real. You know I supported your enemy, Antony. But you also know that I faithfully supported him in his life. I committed myself to him all the way through to his death. I was loyal to him. And now I, the great King Herod, pledge my loyalty to you. And you would think it would be like swords were drawn and he cut Herod's head off. But no, Herod's plan actually worked. He garnished favor with this new Caesar. The Caesar actually gave him more land, more control. Like, if that's not a manipulative person, I don't know what is. He was controlling. He had to control his fate. He had to control all of the outcomes. He had to be on top. And if we're honest, many of us have this kind of nature in ourselves as well. Now, we will not go to lethal lengths to get our way, but many of us need, or really we have this urgency inside of us that we must be in control of every aspect of our lives. See, every date is scheduled, every moment is accounted for, every plan is set in stone. We become rigid. We've got our 6-month plan, we've got our 2-year plan, we've got our 5-year plan, and nothing will stop us from executing that plan. We are goal crushers. We are the people that are gonna go and get it done our way, because our way is the best way, right? Now, don't get me wrong. If you are a goal-oriented, strategically minded, or forward-thinking person, those aren't bad things. We need you in our lives. We need you on our teams. Those aren't bad things. Don't stop doing that. But what I am telling you is that if your natural default setting is control, you need to watch out. You need to watch out. You need to be mindful, because that need for control can almost always rob you spiritually, especially when it comes to life with Jesus, because Jesus calls us towards surrender. Sure, we like Jesus when Jesus can be like our partner. He can be like our like lesser known sidekick. When Jesus can kind of sit in the back seat. We like Jesus then. We like Jesus when he can be the addition. We like Jesus when he can be on the to-do list, when we can cross him off and check our prayers and check our Bible read. We like Jesus then. But it's a little harder for us to like Jesus when he's asking for control. We want to walk with Jesus so long as we can hold on to the reins, so long as we can make any decision we want without consulting him. He's going to bless it, right? That's the attitude that we have. Herod's fear in life was that someone else would take control. And lots of us are like him. We don't allow anything to interfere with our career, with our family, with our position, with our power, with our ambition, with our plans, with our lifestyle. It's all about me, and what I want, and my kingdom, and what I can build. We're not about to let somebody else be king of our lives. And when we get into this mindset, much like Herod, we begin to see Jesus as a threat to our plan, a threat to our purpose, a threat to my kingdom. And when we do this, we miss out. We miss out on the light of Christmas that Jesus actually invites us into. Sure, we're okay walking into the light of Jesus so much as we can leverage God to get what we want. So much as we can leverage God to get more blessing, to get more power, to get more prestige. We're okay with that. But let me tell you this morning, Jesus is not simply a resource for you to get what you want. Jesus is not your spiritual benefactor, giving you blessing on blessing on blessing. Jesus is the light of the world. And as soon as we begin to open up our lives to this light, our lives have to look different. Things have to change. The darkness has to leave. Things look different. We can no longer be in control. Even if we open up the door just a sliver, the light gets in and our lives change. But if we open up the door all the way, everything is illuminated. The darkness is extinguished and we can no longer be in control. The need to hold on to control is a poison. It's a poison that isolates us from people, from God, and from community. Herod's need for control, it often drove him to cut off ties with people in his life because he was afraid that they would take any ounce, any sliver of control he had. And if we're honest, we can get into the habit of doing this as well, but it looks more subtle. It looks like attitudes like this that say, well, I'm not really going to hand it over to anybody because I can do it better. It looks like an attitude that says, well, I could give this to you, but I'm the only one that knows how to do fill in the blank. It looks like, well, I would give it to that person, but they can never do it right. They can never do it as good as me. It's this mentality, this obsession with power that leads to three things, not in your notes and not on the screen. They're bonus points. We see these things in Herod's story. It leads to these three things. First is isolation. Isolation between us and God and between us and other people. As we cut people off because we're afraid of them, we begin to also cut God off because we become afraid of him, afraid of the power that he's asking to take back. That was really his to begin with anyways. The second thing we do is manipulation. Manipulation, both with God and with other people. People in our lives become a leveraging tool for us to get what we want and get where we want, how we want it. And we start to treat God that way as well, to just get to our own ends. And then the third thing is fear. We live in constant fear when we are power and control hungry. It's a constant fear and a constant anxiety that somebody else will come and take it. Somebody else will come and do things better than us, or even worse, God will come and he will ask to take control of our lives. And we'll lose that control. But honestly, losing control, aka surrender, is the very thing that the light of Christmas invites us into. But more on that later. And maybe you're not a control person like me. Maybe that's not your vice. So I encourage you to consider the second characteristic of Herod, was that he had a need for possessions. He had a need for possessions. What's interesting about Herod is that even though I listed all of these terrible things he did, say we just wiped that from the history books, Herod would have been a pretty good king, actually, because he wanted to be known as a great builder. And honestly, he was a great builder. He began the rebuilding of the Jewish temple that people write books about and poems about how beautiful it was. He built 7 different palaces for himself, but he built 7 different palaces. He had 7 different theaters, each seating 9,500 people. He even, in the ancient world, built a sporting arena, the largest of which fit 300,000 fans. When it comes to possessions and things, Herod had it all. From an earthly perspective, Herod lacked nothing. And most of us don't have homes perched on the Mediterranean coast, but if you do, I'm here for you. You know what I'm saying? I could house sit. What's up? But most of us don't have that. However, during the holiday season, many of us become possession obsessed. Possession obsessed. We're extremely preoccupied with all of the things that we need to get. Now, if you don't believe me, think back. Just 10 days ago to Black Friday or Cyber Week. Most people are not actually buying gifts for people on their wish lists during that time. Most people, myself included, are indulging in our own personal Amazon wish lists during that time. We get preoccupied with the getting of Christmas, with the getting of gifts, with the getting of experiences, that we completely miss out on the true light, the most important gift that we could receive. But we also miss out on giving that gift of Jesus, of hope, of life, to the other people in our lives as well. Maybe you're not a controlling person. Maybe you're a total minimalist and you don't acquire a lot of things. But maybe you can find yourself in this third characteristic of Herod, which is Herod had an obsession toward prestige. An obsession with prestige. Herod loved to make a good impression. He could work a room. He built cities and he had great architecture and he named those structures after his superiors and people that were over him. Not because he liked them, because he pretty much hated everybody, but because he wanted them to see him as great. He wanted to have their approval. He was a smooth talker. He had a special ability to win over his opponents. Pretty much all of his wives were image-oriented for his political advantage. And once, he even married the daughter of his biggest rival, just so he could look good. Or do you remember the story earlier where we talked about how Herod was a smooth talker with Octavius? Herod was obsessed with perception and what other people thought about him. And I think that's true for us. It's true in our world today, and honestly, I don't blame you because it's hard not to be, right? In our Western world, we're so image obsessed. We've got Instagram, we've got Facebook, we've got Snapchat, we've got Twitter, we've got all kinds of other things that I don't even know. There's like 500,000 different filters. There's even a filter now where you can turn yourself into a watercolor painting because a regular painting isn't good enough. It's crazy. But maybe you're not in the online world. That's totally cool. For you, maybe the image thing is about your family. Maybe it's about you as a couple. You feel like you have to go on the most lavish vacations. Or maybe it's your kids. You feel like they always have to be put together. They have to have the best grades. They have to act right, even if there's some stuff going on. We have to have the big bank account. We have to spend on whatever we want, whenever we want. And if we are ever struggling, nobody better know about it. We hide. We hide behind these filters, behind these images. We trade our true selves, which are those who are beloved by God, for a fake and counterfeit version of ourselves. We don't grasp onto what's real. We don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough, to be real enough. We hide in our own created darkness instead of accepting Jesus' invitation to walk in the light. But the good news is we can live differently. We can live differently. When it comes to Christmas, when it comes to life with Jesus, we don't have to be Grinches. We can have a better story. We can choose something different. Let's look at the Gospel of John. He has an interesting telling of the Christmas story. It's actually a poem and it's only 5 verses. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, he writes this. In the beginning, the Word already existed, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everyone that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. This light, it shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The thing about the Christmas story that John tells us here is that no matter if we choose to acknowledge it, no matter if we choose to jump in and be a part of the story, to jump on the bandwagon, to jump into the story, no matter what we choose, the light is still coming. The light has already come. This story of hope and wonder and restoration that Jesus already proclaimed has already happened. We just get to choose to jump on board or not. We can choose to have a better story or not. I kind of think of it as God's story is like a river, right? It's like a river throughout time and history, the story of God coming down, being a part of our lives, forgiving us of so much, inviting us into something new, into something wonderful. It's like a river in front of us. Imagine it in your mind, and you're standing on the riverbank. The story of God moving in front of you. You have the choice to jump in the river. You have a choice to be a part of the story and let it carry you away, or you have the choice to stay on the riverbank. But either way, the river is going to keep flowing. The river is going to keep going. Either way, the light is going to continue to move forward. Just like the Christmas story in Matthew. Whether Herod wanted it to happen or not, Jesus was coming. And Jesus would be king. And now the great King Herod is a side character in the greatest story because he chose to miss it. He chose not to jump in. The Christmas story in John, it gives us hope, as Pastor Soy talked about last week, because it's a hope that no matter how dark the world gets, there is always light. There is always light. And it gives us hope this morning as well, because even though we at times have a little bit of Herod in us, we can choose to let the light of Christmas and the light of Jesus into our lives and consume all those dark places within us. 1 John 1, verses 5 through 7 says this. It says, "This is the message we have heard from Jesus, and now declare to you, God is light, and there is no darkness in him at all. So we are lying if we say we have fellowship with God, but go on living in spiritual darkness. We're not practicing truth. But if we're living in the light, as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin." This verse clearly calls us to live differently, to live in the light of Jesus. But how do we do that? How do we do that this holiday season? I have 4 suggestions for you about how you can do that starting today. So the first one is this. It's simply to come to Jesus and worship. In order to step into this light of Christmas, we need to come to Jesus and worship. As we read in the Christmas story in Matthew, the wise men came to Jesus. They came to Jesus in worship. And this form of worship wasn't just the customary acknowledgement. It was something a little bit different. See, these wise men, they had come from Persia. And what's kind of interesting about this is that the Persian king actually called himself the King of Kings. However, our story takes a little bit of an odd twist because these wise men come and they see Jesus and they recognize the true King of Kings. They respond to him not just with honor and acknowledgement, but with worship. We learned about worship in our worship series. We learned that this word means proskuneo, which really means to just lay down in full submission and in full surrender. These wise men, they didn't just come to pay respects. They came to humble themselves before Jesus, the true King of Kings. And in this moment, they submitted themselves totally to him. And so this Christmas, let's take our cue from the wise men. The wise men were not concerned with building their own kingdom. They were not concerned with self-praise, adoration, power, or prestige. They're only concerned with Jesus, the light that was right in front of them. And this Christmas, I encourage you, if you're caught up in trying to make it all happen, if you're caught up in trying to have things your own way, if you're caught up in trying to have the perfect life, if you're caught up in trying to control every outcome and every single thing, I just encourage you to just check yourself. Just check yourself this morning. Come to Jesus in worship. Accept his invitation to build his kingdom as opposed to your kingdom. Surrender to him. The kingdom that Herod was building was a kingdom full of struggle. It was a kingdom of manipulation. It was a kingdom of greed. But in Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19, Jesus lays out the plan for his kingdom that he invites us into. And Jesus says this in Luke chapter 4. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." I don't know about you, but that's the type of kingdom I want to be a part of. I don't want to be a part of my struggle bus kingdom that's all about me, that's all about my manipulation and my greed and what I want. I want to be a part of Jesus's kingdom. It's a kingdom that has good news for those who are struggling. It's a kingdom that we see captives are being released. It's a kingdom where we see miracles. It's a kingdom where we see people set free from addiction to live a new kind of life. It's a kingdom of favor. That's the kind of kingdom I want to be a part of, and I hope you want it too. But you have to choose. You can choose to stand on the sidelines, or you can choose to jump in. The choice is yours. The kingdom of God is here. Jesus says that when he came, that the kingdom is here. The kingdom is now. The kingdom is happening all around you. Maybe we don't see it in its full perfection, but we're on our way. And you can be a part of it, or you can sit on the side. And so ask yourself, whose kingdom am I building? Whose kingdom am I building? Am I building my own kingdom? Or am I accepting this amazing invitation to step into the light and join God in building his? Now, the second step to stepping into the light of Christmas is to give things away. Learn to give things away. One of the things that makes us like Herod is our need for possessions, to accumulate more and more things. But we see something totally different in the wise men in the Christmas story. These wise men, they had come from a long way off, and they were giving both gifts and their time. They were sent from Persia. They came from a land far, far away. They came on foot or by camel or whatever. They came slowly, right? They took time to come and see Jesus. And so how this season are you going to give things away? And not just give gifts to people, because we all have a long list of people to buy gifts for, and I'm not saying don't do that, like Austin, don't do that. But what I am saying is ask yourself today, what gift can I give to God this holiday season? And in this new year, as we're thinking about our goals, as we're thinking about plans, God, what gift can I give to you? Maybe it's your time. Maybe it's your talent. Maybe it's your treasure. But I don't know what it is for you. But ask yourself, what can I give this Christmas, this upcoming year, in order that instead of acquiring more things for myself, which we all probably already have too many things, how can I live open-handedly with God? The third thing that we can do when we are trying to step into the light of Christmas is recognize that the gift of Christmas is for everyone. The gift of Christmas is for everyone. It can be really easy during the holiday season for Christians to be super judgmental of people who don't grasp the reason for the season, right? It can be really easy for us to throw shade on people who don't believe what we believe or think what we think. If you don't believe me, just Google the great red cup Starbucks debacle of 2016. If that's you, if you struggle with that, all of us do at some point. Let me just caution you. Jesus was the light of the world, the entire world, not just the light of your world. The original Christmas story, the wise men coming to worship Jesus, would have been very alarming. For those original readers reading this story in the Gospel of Matthew, they would have been scandalized, and honestly, they probably would have been really offended. offended that in the opening lines of the story about their Savior coming, their king that they had waited for, there was the mention of these wise men. Why? Well, the wise men, as I said, they had come from Persia, but they were also known to practice divination, meaning they were magicians, and not like card trick magicians, like cauldron magicians. They were magicians. This was prohibited by the Jewish people. It would have been absurd to them that in this Christmas story, these people that practice actual magic, of which astrology was one, how they followed the star, were going to see Jesus. Yet there's a group of Jewish people in the story that don't do anything. It would be like if the birth of Jesus was in our modern times. It would be like if no Christian went to go see him, but you had a group of Wiccans, tarot card readers, and psychics going to worship Jesus. It would have been alarming. It would have been confusing, but it is a great example. It's an example to us that says the message of light, this message of Christmas, is for everyone to draw closer. It's a reminder that we are not the judge and jury of who this message is for. It's a reminder to us that the Christ of Christmas isn't just for Christians. He came to be the light of the world. Now this morning, the final thing that we can do when we're walking towards the light of Christmas and of Jesus is simply this. It's to take action today. Take action today. Take a next step. Do something, do anything to move towards the light, to move towards Jesus. In the original Christmas story, we have a lot of interesting elements. We have Herod the crazy. We have wise men, the magicians, but then you also have this group of Jewish priests. Remember, Herod, he had asked them where Jesus was going to be. They knew exactly where Jesus was going to be, because these are the people that you would expect to go see him. These were the people that had been waiting for Jesus, that had been waiting for a Messiah. These were the people that were considered the insiders. But there's something interesting about this story, and the strange thing is that the people who have literally been waiting 400 years for Jesus, when he finally does come, they do nothing. They stay behind. The story says that these outsiders, these pagans, these astrologers, these magicians go instead. So let's take our lesson from the priests, that it doesn't matter how much you know about Jesus, you can still choose to sit and do nothing. It's your choice to be a part of the story. You can choose to jump into the story or not. You can choose for your life to remain exactly the same. You can choose to sit in this darkness. Just because you know a lot of things about Jesus, it's not the same thing as walking with him. But you have the choice today to begin to walk more intimately with him, to begin to walk more closely with him, or to just continue doing that. Take the cue from the wise men today. Get up. Do something. Do anything. Follow, seek, find, doubt, ask questions. Do something to take a step this morning. And so this morning I want to invite all of us, no matter where you are in this story, to take a next step towards Jesus, towards the light of Christmas. Maybe ask, whose kingdom am I building? Maybe ask, what can I give to God? How can I take action? Maybe for you, it's letting go of control and telling God you want to build his kingdom instead of your own. Maybe it's allowing God to control the outcomes, because if we're honest with ourselves, he's been faithful in the past. So why would he ever stop? Maybe it's that we need to humble ourselves, to give of ourselves this holiday season to him. Maybe for some, it's letting go of our need to be perceived as perfect or perceived as having it all together. Maybe for you, your next step is to be authentic and vulnerable with God. And then take that step and be authentic and vulnerable in community, because for all of you, I know God has placed people around you. But for many of us, we have chosen not to let those people in. We have chosen not to let those people see how we struggle and how we doubt and how we question God at times. But I encourage you this morning, let them in, because other people are struggling too. We can walk together. Or maybe for you, it's just you need to widen your scope of who this Christmas message is for. Most of all, no matter what your step is, don't waste time. Don't waste any more time. You have all of the information. They say that knowledge is power, but that's not true. Knowledge applied is powerful. This information that you have will not be transformative to your life unless you choose to take that next step. No one can make it for you. Even Jesus isn't going to make that decision for you, but he is standing before you, ready to receive you however you are. So I encourage you, take a step closer this morning to walking with Jesus, to walking in his light, to have a better story, because today you get to choose to be a part of God's story. Let's pray. God, we just thank you so much for today. We thank you for the opportunity to come and to worship you. Lord, we thank you in the busyness of this season that we have the opportunity to connect in a meaningful way with you and with other people. We thank you for the ways that we've learned about you and about ourselves. Father, I pray for those of us who have some work to do. Father, that we would be free from guilt and shame, but we would just simply acknowledge the areas in our lives that we need to invite you in. Allow us to give ourselves the same grace that you give us, to see ourselves as your children, beloved by you. God, allow us to begin to take steps towards you, to walk in your light, to continue to walk with you, grow our intimacy with you, but also with those we are in community with. Father, those who are struggling in isolation this morning, give them the courage to open up. Give us all the courage to lay down our plans and our purposes and to begin building your kingdom. Thank you for coming to be with us. In your name.